Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next webinar in the 4D Evolution webinar series, which is a series of webinars looking at how democracy and community engagement can be improved with the use of technology. Today, I'm really excited to have Crispin Butteriss here from Bang the Table. I'm actually really excited about this because it's been a long time watching what Bang the Table has been doing in Australia, and it's such a well-recognised organisation, especially in local governments, and it's used so broadly across the field that I really am pleased to have Crispin here to talk through some of the new things that he's been doing with Bang the Table and new services. Before we go too far into this, I just thought Crispin was really interested to know who in this call was actually on the last call with the City of Melbourne. So I've just put a poll up to see if you were in the City of Melbourne webinar, which was 2 weeks ago, and that webinar looked specifically at how the City of Melbourne was changing their budgetary processes using community engagement and addressing some pretty severe, deficit risks for the future. So Crispin, at the moment, the poll's sort of sitting on 50-50. It's moved a couple of times, yes and no, but it seems like about half the population were here for that webinar and the other half weren't. For those of you who weren't on the webinar, if you go to the 4D Evolution webinar website, you'll be able to see that recording of that webinar in the future. So I'll just end that poll and hand over to you, Crispin, to say hello to everybody, and then we might start with a couple of questions. But before we do that, you'll notice that you can put some chats in there, and I can see we already have hello from City of Hobart, and hello from Christine at Tagaty, and hello from Shire of Carnarvon and Cottesloe. So hi everyone. So you're already using the chat bar. That's really exciting. As Crispin goes along with his presentation, please don't hesitate at any point to start writing any questions that you have. And once we've covered sort of 3 basic questions to start with, we'll start bringing in your questions. So really nice to see you all there, and I'll let Crispin say hello.
Oh, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning if you're on the West Coast. An immediate apology. 2 minutes before this call went live, a dog started howling outside. And so if you can hear anything, it's not me torturing any animals, but there's just an unhappy animal nearby that I can't control at the moment. So hopefully it quietens down during the course of the call. I wanted to know how many people were on the last call, the last webinar, because so I'll provide a little bit more context around the case study work that I'm going to talk about today. There's 2 case studies that I was going to talk to. One is Devonport in Tasmania, and the other is Halifax in Canada, and they're on very, very different scales, but they both did some things that were good and that I think are worth sharing with everybody on the call. So how do you want to kick this off, Joanne?
Okay, so what we might do is start with the questions that we thought were commonly asked at the last webinar and or would be interesting to the people who were at that. And the first one is specifically a lot of people on the last webinar wanted to know a bit more about the software that was used behind consulting with communities about budgets. And I know that Budget Allocator is the software that Bang the Table have created and used, and I thought perhaps if you would be happy to talk us through that software a little bit so that people are familiar with it.
Okay, I'll do that by actually showing. I'll share my screen straight away. That's probably the easiest thing to do. And the big one, start screen share. Google Talk plugin would like to control this computer. Ah! I guess that's okay.
I presume so. This is on a Google platform, so.
Yeah, I'll do that instead. There we go. All right, I'm screen sharing now, apparently. Can everybody see can you see my screen okay, Joanne? At
the moment, yes, I can.
All right, cool. Okay, so you should see in front of you now a fairly simple screen that has the Halifax logo on the top left-hand side and Budget Allocator written underneath it. So I'll talk to the software through the case study, if that's okay. I think that probably makes the most sense. We built Budget Allocator in direct response to a City Council, Waverley it was, a request about 7 years ago or so, the first version of it, because they were, like a lot of councils, or it seemed the common thing is they were under pressure to work out whether to increase revenue to fund more programs or to cut programs, basically, to get their budget under control, and to work out within that budget framework what the community priorities were. And they looked around the world and they couldn't find exactly what they were looking for, because they wanted to be able to ask questions in a couple of different ways. And so one was in the typical way that most budget allocations are done, in that you're asking the community whether they want to increase or decrease the budget for a particular business unit, normally by a fixed percentage. But they also had a whole list of discretionary projects, and they wanted people to choose between those as well. And the reason I hope I've chosen the right one, Halifax, I think, did both of those things. So if I click through here, this is Halifax have used the budget allocator twice. Now, the thing you'll notice is that it's a very big organisation. Compared to most Australian councils, it's a really big organisation. So it's got a budget of 422 million. But it doesn't really matter how big the organisation is. It's about the structure of the way that they've thought through how they're going to get people to think about the kind of services that they provide. And straight away you can see that the reason they've got such a big budget is because they have responsibilities that would normally be associated with state governments here in Australia. For example, police on there. So they've structured the budgeting process around big themes, like in this case, protective services, and then they've got specific departments identified. So police, and they've said you're of what the impact of that would be. Now, some organisations choose to put images into those spaces as well to make, if you're talking about physical infrastructure, it allows you to say this is actually the physical impact of more or less maintenance, or this is what this piece of equipment looks like compared to this piece of equipment, sort of thing. And what we've tried to do is to make it easy for organisations to collect feedback on particular elements of the budget as people are filling in, making their choices. So if you decide that you want to, for example, increase this budget by 10%, you'll see that the total budget allocation over here starts to fill up. So we've spent 86 million of our 422 million budget. And if I want, I can leave a comment here. I can say, I think this is the highest priority area for expenditure, and I'd actually like to be able to increase the budget by 25% or something. Or, conversely, I can decrease the budget by 10%, and I can put in a comment to that effect. But let's increase the budget. So you'll notice that when I decrease the budget down here, the allocator changed, it dropped. It obviously didn't go into deficit because I'm still spending $71 million. So it's now at 70, or nearly 71 million of the 422. But I'm going to use the increased budget increments to show what happens. So again, RCMP, I'm not sure what that is, to be honest. That's getting another $26 million spent on it. Fire, another 66 million. Emergency measures in general for 251,000, which is not very much, and so on. We go down the page. So each of these headings theoretically could represent, if you're doing this at a state government level, it could represent entire departments. If you're doing it at a council level, then it can regional line items effectively of the budget. You could have all of those detailed if you wanted to. So, and sometimes, so sometime last year when the federal budget was under consideration, we did a little exercise with News Corp, and they basically simplified the budget down into, I think, seven different line items. But the problem with it, from my point of view, was that it so oversimplified the budgeting process that you ended up without enough detail to make good quality decisions. So the more information you can put in there, the better. I'm just going to quickly go down the page, go down, 84 million. Oh, that's a nice big one. Road maintenance, another 12 million. Almost there, we're almost topping it out. Right. And development approvals. Oh gosh, we're getting so close. Economic development. There we are. Right. Okay. So we've finally gone over budget. So then the budget goes into the red. It tells us that we're over budget, and it also has a little setting in there. So based on some simple calculations that you can feed in to tell you basically how much your tax, in this case, your rates would increase by. So it's basically getting the person that's taking the survey to approve an 8.14% increase in their annual rates. And then Halifax have then worked out what that means for the average ratepayer. So a 1% increase means $18 a year. So it's 8 times 18, whatever that is. And so in this case, I've made a liar of myself. All of their budget areas are these basically plus or minus on the existing budget. Projects, and they would be projects that instead of having a little round circle, that have a square checkbox, and they're not either or, basically. So it's a list of projects that you can choose to accept or ignore. And if we keep going, now we see that we spent $460 million of a $422 million budget. We're going to increase the rates. I decreased it again, so it's 7.1% increase in rates. These are all my expenditures, just to give people a summary. As long as I'm happy with that, then I can click on continue. If I'm not, I can go back. If I continue, then I provide my details. Now, the reason we do that, so we ask for the details right at the end of the process because the data is already saved. So this way, you can have what we call verified and unverified responses to the budgeting process. So you'll end up in the reporting with a whole bunch of people who have actually filled in their details here, and you'll also end up in the reporting with some people who haven't filled in the details, or they've filled in the details but then they haven't clicked on the little link in the email that they've received just to confirm who they are. And you really need this kind of verification process to make sure that it's a valid survey, that there isn't just one person filling it in over and over again, of course, or getting all of their mates to do it. But what it also means is that if somebody provides their information and then they change their mind later on and come back, and as long as they provide the same information, then it will overwrite their original options. So, so it's a safety check, I guess, on the validity of the survey process. And by putting it at the end of the budgeting process, it just motivates people to actually fill in the details. Whereas if you ask for the details up front, it can feel like a hurdle. All right, so if I go back to Hangouts and webinars, I love being able to see people. So that's the software in a nutshell. Obviously, coming out of the back end, there's reports that show lovely pictures of the options people have chosen, and there's CSV downloads of all of the comments that people have made and those sorts of things, so that you can interpret them. So that's the budget allocator software in a nutshell. It's not principally what we do. Normally we append it to the use of, well, most of our clients are using our other software, EngagementHQ, so they use Budget Allocator in parallel with EngagementHQ. But that's it in a nutshell, Joanne. So, is there anything else on that?
No, I don't have any other questions, but if anyone has any other questions that they'd like to ask, please feel free to put it in the chat. Rob asked, or Rob commented 144. I'm not quite sure why he said $144. Maybe he meant 144,000 or million, not sure. Rob, if you want to explain, that would be cool. In the meantime, we'll go into the next question, and I'll just screen share that so people can see what we're looking at here. So the first question that we asked Crispin to talk about was just to show the software Budget Allocator, and I know, Crispin, that a couple of people did find it a little blurry, so we might get the link to the Halifax page and send it out so people can actually have a look at it for themselves. Just don't.
Yeah, I can. Every site that I send you to that I show today, I'll put them in a little email so that everybody can go to them in their own time. Absolutely.
Yeah, so if they felt that it was a little blurry, they can go in and have a quick look for themselves and see what that might look like if they used it for themselves. And I guess you started talking about this, Crispin, right at the end, which was talking about how you've seen Budget Allocator being used well, as opposed to Budget Allocator not working as effectively. What makes the difference between those two things?
Okay, so I'm going to show you screen share again, and I apologise to people who aren't getting very good resolution of the screens. Hopefully, if we give it a little bit more time to resolve on screen, then that might help. So this is, so as I said, Halifax City in Canada have used Budget Allocator twice, and this is the 2016 budget. They did it in 2015 as well, and they're a really good example of using, of combining EngagementHQ with the budget allocation, with Budget Allocator. So what we generally try to talk to organisations about doing is, instead of just using BA by itself effectively as a survey tool, and it's a pretty, I mean, it can be really useful if you're in the field, and so Wagga Wagga, for example, has used Budget Allocator in a really a nice way, working with families and kids in playgrounds to help them to use it as an online survey to pick playground equipment, for example. So they know they have a limited budget of $40,000 per playground. They say they get a whole bunch of pictures of different type of play equipment, and they basically put it onto iPads, and they go out into the field and they survey people in the fields. And when they hit $40,000, then they have to go, oh, actually, well, hang on, no, I really want that. So then they start changing their priorities and choosing what they like best. So that's a nice example of using, integrating the face-to-face and online, the digital, with each other. And the benefit, obviously, is that the data that's, it's just much harder to go out into the field with all of the resources that you would need to be able to show people all of the options normally. And also, once the data is captured, it's captured. And so it's easy to go back to the office and then start interpreting that data and have it as an evidence base. Shape Your City Halifax is obviously on a completely different scale to that, because it is about the entire city budget of $430 million, whatever it is. What these guys do very well is create a context for the budget conversation. And this screen, the 2015 was probably even better, to be honest, because they spent a lot of time creating little videos like this one over here, which has got Bruce Fisher, the Manager of Financial Policy and Planning, talking about the budgeting process. Halifax actually got pretty much all of their senior management team responsible for different major expenditure areas to sit in front of camera and do pieces to camera talking about how they spent their money and what the priorities were, and what they were hoping to achieve, that sort of thing, just to give the community a really, really good context for the kinds of decisions that they were having to make. And that's very, very unusual. That's kind of the from what I've seen anywhere with any of our clients that we've worked with, to go to that amount of effort to present the information in such a digestible form is pretty unique. So that's the first part of what they did well, to actually make sure that all of that content was accessible. The more normal way of doing things that we've all sort of, where community engagement has come from, traditionally budgets would have been made internally anyway, and the community would never have seen them. And then as community engagement sort of gradually became embraced, then people might have to, normally you might have to read a whole bunch of documentation. The information would be presented in PDFs. If it was a bit more accessible, then it would be available in HTML so people could read it online. There might be summaries or good FAQs, things like that. They're all good, but to take it that next step to actually produce video explaining the issues and explaining the impacts of raising or lowering a budget is really, they kind of set the benchmark. They set it very high. But that obviously is only the first part of the engagement process. That's about giving the community good quality information. The other thing that other councils that we've worked with have done very well is to give the community then an opportunity to talk about the context of the budgeting process for them. And by that I mean talking about what it is about their place, so their council area or whatever it is, that makes it so important, and so that they actually bring those values to the fore and make sure that those values actually inform the budgeting process as well. And we worked with a little tiny council on the north coast of New South Wales, Clarence Valley, last year, and like most councils, and especially regional councils, they were really struggling under budget pressure, and they were going to have to make some really hard decisions about what areas to keep financing, to the point where they were considering digging up a lot of the rural roads and converting them back to being dirt roads because the maintenance was cheaper, for example, things like that, because they didn't have the maintenance budget for bitumen roads. So some really big, hard decisions were going to have to be made. So they used Budget Allocator, and they put in all of the budget items and did all the normal things, but they also set up an EngagementHQ space like this, but they provided a series of discussion forums so that the community could talk about all of the things that were actually important to it, and also to talk broadly about, they also talked broadly about the relationship with council and the kinds of council services that were being offered. And they launched an online brainstormer with two different sections, or two questions. And the first was, how can council save money? And the other was, how can council raise money in a way that that the community feels okay about? Because the problem, as you will have noted from the example I showed you, is that it's all about expenditure. And we all know that there's the other side of the budget is revenue, and there's no opportunity there to talk about revenue raising. And that's partly because that's something that often organisations are afraid to talk about, but councils, governments do raise a lot of revenue through all sorts of different mechanisms. And so they put it out there to get the community talking about the sorts of things that would be okay to consider as revenue raising opportunities. So
Crispin, sorry to interrupt. It looks like a whole lot of people have actually gone straight to the website. Vivian shared the website so that they can see the image of the screen share a little bit more clearly. Okay. So I just thought, if you want, I don't know if you have many more slides that you wanted to share, but we could probably put your face back on.
Cool. I'll just turn off screen share. Maybe if I just put the links to the websites in the chat. Is that reasonable? Yeah,
that sounds good.
Okay. So I will also copy in. I've noticed that there's a link there to Shape Your City Halifax. Yep. And I'll paste in there the Halifax tax budget allocator, and I'll also paste in there the Speak Up Devonport EngagementHQ page that refers to their budgeting process, and the Devonport budget allocator. Hopefully that makes it a little bit easier for everybody. There you go.
Yeah, that seems really great. Thank you. So while people are having a quick look at those, I thought I'd have a shot at trying to summarize what you said, so you can tell me how incorrect I got it. But anyway, let's have a shot. So what I heard you saying was that budget allocator works best when there's a number of other things happening. So one is that the content is accessible.
Yep.
Second one is that you go into the field and collect data as well, so that you don't just simply.
That depends. So that was a really unique instance of using it in the field, because one of the other things separate to the budget allocation process that we're always getting asked about is youth engagement. And and this was a really, really nice example where clearly, because it's all about playground equipment, they were going to be able to get kids and young people involved in the conversations, but they didn't want to just go out with paper surveys, and they didn't want to go out with reams of pictures of all of the different options, because there are dozens and dozens of different things. So they use digital to support what would probably be a traditional face-to-face process, where they actually go out and basically confront families that are in parks and sort of jump on them and say, here, take our survey while you're enjoying the park. But they use digital to supplement or to complement that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So sometimes going into the field to collect data may also make sense, but it sounds like not always. Yeah. You also spoke about, if you want to set the bar really high, you could actually produce video that you could put online to explain the effects of raising or reducing certain budgets. And then you also spoke about doing this in a broader context of getting the community to talk about their values and what's important to them, so that people can start prioritising according to what it is that people want. And you also talked about a specific online brainstormer that talked about, budget costs versus revenue raising versus budget reductions as another tool that could help in making the budget allocator process more rounded, I guess. Is that a summary of?
That's a good summary. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The issue of providing people with enough context so that you're not just getting top of mind responses to the problem is really, that's a really critical issue generally in community engagement. It's what we all aim for, rather than just using community engagement as another form of push polling or something like that. It's actually about having conversations, and the budgeting tools, whatever they are, if they're done without any real context, then you just get uneducated feedback. Now that provides you with some information, but obviously it's much more valuable if if there's been a conversation in front of the survey process. And that's, by the way, the budgeting softwares that are out there, and ours is just one of them. They're just surveys. They're just surveys, but they're designed in a way to be more fun to use than normal surveys, and to give the community members some feedback while they're doing it, so they're actually conscious of the fact they're making choices. Can you hear that dog?
Yes.
Oh my.
Sorry. I've had a couple of comments from people saying, "Oh, they're sorry for the dog." So I'm hoping that it's just missing its master as opposed to it.
I'll go and explore that after this. Anybody that's been anywhere near any IAP2 training or anything like that will know that that's an advantage. You want dialogue. You don't just want people randomly filling in a survey without having any kind of background and a conversation that actually hopefully gives you the answers to the question why. Why have you made that choice? Why do you think it's important to increase the police budget by 10% or decrease the police budget by 10%? What has motivated you to make that decision? Because once you start digging into the why, then you get a much more coherent understanding of what the community is really, what the community really values and what the service look like. So the relation is blunt. They're blunt, and so they need to be surrounded by a better process, and that's digital engagement or survey work or whatever it is that you're doing, really. If they can be surrounded by a process and surrounded by a conversation, then they'll be much, much stronger.
Yep.
Next question.
Yeah, this next and last question, and then we have questions from other people too, so I'll do this one quite quickly. And this comes about, I guess, Crispin, from a conversation that we had beforehand about what makes, you know, Bang the Table, I guess, quite unique in this field, and why does it focus specifically on building online communities? And could you explain for people who aren't familiar with the term online communities what that means as well?
Yeah, okay. So this is something that took us a while to work out that we were doing, to be honest. When we were 8 years ago, we were very project focused, and it was about getting feedback on specific, you know, on specific programs and projects and things that mostly at that time that councils were doing, and still half of the organisations we work with are local government, but half aren't these days. And over time, what we noticed happening, obviously, was that the particular less so state and federal government, because people tend to deal with local government as a community, and therefore there's a whole lot of issues that a local government deals with. So it's all about my place. So I want to keep having conversations with my local council, whereas state and federal issues tend to be dealt with on an issue basis, and don't want to, as a community member, necessarily become part of the community for the Department of Human Services, but you are interested in housing, for example, or you are interested in transport. So I'm particularly talking about councils. So over time, what we saw happening was that they were growing at the time what we just considered to be databases, and so all of these people were registering to be part of the conversations, and before we knew it, there were hundreds and then thousands of people in these databases for the organisations. And finally, the penny dropped that actually all of these people are the people who have demonstrated are willing to and want to have conversations repeatedly about public policy issues. They actually are the people who have bought into their local area enough to want to have these conversations. And so what we've found is over time that the direct marketing value of those database communities is invaluable, because they're the people that you can, as soon as you have a new project that you want to consult about, they're the people that you can flick an email to and get a response from. And so in parallel to, before I started this business, my methodology was always about working with whoever's in the room. So the community engagement process was, mine was, whoever turns up, they're the people that you work with, and they're the people that have got the energy and drive to be part of the process. Whereas a market research model is much more focused on, getting a representative, for whatever that means, representative sample of members of the community to provide feedback. So what we've actually gradually seen over time is that as those community databases have grown for organisations, you can get both, which is fabulous. So you actually, as long as they're big enough, and they are, we've got clients now that have been with us for 8 years. So, and I think it's Gold Coast Council has something like 10,000 members of their database. It's enormous. So it's very easy to reach enough people so that you can be satisfied that you have achieved both goals: the goal of being transparent and giving everybody the opportunity to participate, and the goal of making sure that you're reaching a breadth of people. So men and women of all ages, potentially from, or hopefully from a range of places within the council, so from different suburbs and pockets, so that you can actually start to get a really good feel for the kind of people that are engaging regularly, and also spot where the holes are, so that you can then do more targeted marketing to the places where, and the niches where you're not hearing from people. And that's the value, that's the massive value. So we've started, there's actually Ray, who does a lot of our, who's been with us forever, who pointed out that some of the language actually needs to start changing, because it's actually more about now trying to encourage community members to join this online community, to become a member of the online community, rather than just registering to give you feedback. It's actually about becoming a member of something that's bigger than yourself, to have an ongoing conversation in the local area. And that's what we're kind of fixated on these days, because that's where the social good comes from, and that's the value that you leave behind in the place. So
yeah, no, thank you. I think that's from having done individual project collections over time. I always wondered what happens to all those people who, you know, filled out that survey, and you know, what a great loss to not ask them at the same time one more question. Would you like us to offer you opportunities to consult on other matters? You know, there could be, it's I've always thought that was a pity. So I'll go into some questions from the participants. Oh, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say this, the guys of our dev team have been doing a lot of work lately as well on being able to do database segmentation, so that the campaigning can be done to exactly the right people as well, which is really cool. So you actually want to target 18 to 25-year-old women who have previously expressed an interest in cycling, that sort of thing. And so now the system will let you do that, so that when you know that either you know there's a gap in your knowledge, so you need they can do that, or the whole program is about those people. So you don't really want to hear from 55-year-old angry men. You're from 18 to 24-year-old young women or something like that. So, so it's getting quite sophisticated. It's quite good. Sorry,
Yeah.
Questions?
I mean, that's the amazing thing about technology, isn't it? So, there's a question here from someone who's registered themselves as Charles Sturt. So, the first question is, what form of feedback in a report can we pull out of the budget allocator tool? So and the second question is same question, saying I'm interested in more information about the analytics behind the budget allocator tool.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I can talk to that. I wish I could show you, but I don't have login for that one at the moment, so I can't show you that. There's two forms of data that come out of the process. So the quantitative survey data. So the reporting actually is there's on-screen reporting, which gives you a visual indication of what the options are. So basically, bar charts that show, you know, if you've got 4 options against a particular budget area, say for police, you know, we said we have 5 options: maintain, increase or decrease by 5 or 10%. And so it'll just show you on screen which of those is the preferred option straight up. So that's dead simple. And there's downloads that give you that information as well, so that they can go straight in via PDFs to reports to council or organiser, whoever the decision-making group is, so that there's actually an easy appendices for that. The other form of feedback, obviously, is the qualitative. So all of those comments that are made against individual budget areas, and the comments that are made right at the end of the budgeting process. And that's basically that's a CSV file at this stage. So it's not and then using any of the qualitative data package straight into those. So, are there any other questions?
I've got a question that sort of follows on from that quickly. I know that you couldn't show anything on screen. Is that something that you might be able to send a link for later?
Yeah, I can get a screenshot of something and send it to you. Yeah, I'm just a bit because it's client. I have to find something that's appropriate to share.
Yeah, and I don't think that people here actually want the data so much as seeing sort of what the format would look like. So if you need to black bits out or something, I'm sure that would be fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Look, it looks like the majority of other emails have actually just asked for the links that you sent to be included. So we'll do that. I'm just having a quick look to see if there's anything else. If there's any other questions that people want to ask. Oh, and by the way, Rob mentioned that his $144 was actually what the rate increase of $18 per at 8% was. So there you go. We have someone who has to do math quickly in the room or in the webinar.
Or has a calculator. Yeah.
I'm going with incredible genius maths person.
Yeah. Yes, we can definitely send you everything. Oh, look, and if anybody missed out on anything and you need anything else apart from this, then feel free to get in touch with me, because we can walk through something that's much more relevant to you personally. Yeah, done on the head. Very nice. Sorry, is that Vivian Gard?
You're just looking to see who Vivian is. Vivian, do you want to tell us who you are? So while Vivian gets a second to answer that question, I thought I might just quickly let people know what happens from this webinar once it's recorded. So once it's recorded, we'll put it up on YouTube. We'll just make sure Crispin's happy with that first, and maybe add some slides, or maybe add a screenshot of the actual web page itself rather than the blurry one over the top. And then after that, we'll also send out an email with that YouTube video and all of the links listed underneath, and also the YouTube account itself will list all of those links underneath so people can go in and have a look at it further. And did Vivian end up answering the question? Sorry, wrong Viv.
Wrong Viv. But Judy's asked a question, what other software is used? So the other software that we use is called EngagementHQ, and we can put links to that as well.
Do you want to, if people want to know a little bit more about that, maybe can you give us a snapshot in 2 minutes about what that does? So
I will actually do better than that. EngagementHQ is it's really why we exist, in terms of actually being able to pay the bills. EngagementHQ is the community engagement software that's used by agencies and councils everywhere. So I will copy a link and actually post it there. Paste. That's a PDF that explains it all, and the link to website is there.
Okay.
Basically, what it's a SaaS product, so software as a service product that, from the outside world point of view, looks like a website, but it has integrated into it about 8 different feedback tools. So we started off with discussion forums because my passion has always been dialogue, and then the market convinced us that we needed to put in online surveys, which I have really mixed feelings about, but it's what people love to use, but it's not where my passion lies. Then we built a story gathering tool, so that for instances where, particularly where you have really emotionally fraught subjects and you don't want people to be having a debate with each other, you actually just want people to be able to share their stories. It's a safe place to do that. The example would be when we did a project with the National Disability Insurance Agency a few years ago, and they just got people to answer the question, what's it like to live in Australia with a disability? And so the stories that came out of that were incredibly rich. There's also an online, it's all online, there's a question and answer tool so that you can manage Q&A processes either privately with the public or publicly with the public, so you can actually build up a dynamic online database of questions and answers. Australia Post have used that incredibly well as part of their reform process that they're having to go through at the moment to survive because of the collapse in postal service money. There's a digital community mapping tool in there so that you can do mini spatial surveys, which are great for any kind of transport planning particularly, but also community services, that sort of stuff. And there's a few other things. And all of those tools are in there so that depending on what the project looks like, the whole idea is that you can actually match the methodology to the project needs. So you don't just throw a hammer at a project because you've got a hammer. You actually say, well, which of these tools is the right tool for this project at this particular point in time? So if you are in the process of trying to understand an issue in its broadest context, then you might gather stories in the first place, so that you get a really rich picture of what's going on. You might move on to actually doing a small survey to make sure that you've actually captured things properly. And then you might do some, a brainstormer as well. Then you might do brainstorming to actually look at solutions, to start looking at solutions to that, around that problem.
So
and then you might go, when you're doing what's called, yeah, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to interrupt because there was a question that came in next about Brainstormer, and the question said, I got told about Brainstormer yesterday. Is that another process, or is that the same thing?
So brainstorming, at least the way that when we use the word brainstormer, it's an online ideation tool. So it's for, the reason we call it brainstormer is because, having come out of the traditional face-to-face engagement process, it's sticky notes, basically. It's where, you have 50 people in a room and you give everybody 5 sticky notes and you say, okay, write down an idea on every sticky note, and then you stick the wall, and then you give everybody put your dots on all of the favourite ideas. And so by the end of the process, you've got hopefully 10 ideas that stand out from all of the rest as potentially having legs. That's all it is. And so it gives you a priority list of the things you should focus on, and the stuff that's the drops off the bottom fairly quickly that way. And when you're doing, if you're doing problem solving, at least the design thinking approach to problem solving would say that the ideation process comes first, and then after that you do what's called prototyping. So you would do prototyping on maybe the top 5 ideas, and from our point of view, that's where you might actually start using things like discussion forums, where you want to really, really dig into an idea before you get too excited about it, before you start fleshing it out too much. So I would like to say, so when we finish up, what I'll do is find some links to good examples of the different tools as well, and maybe that can go in the follow-up email of how they're being used right now. So, for example, I know that Auckland Transport are using community mapping exceptionally well right now. They've got some really good projects going ahead.
Fantastic. I might make this last question from Vivian, just for time reasons, I guess. And she said, are you aware of any known barriers or challenges that users of both Budget Allocator and EngagementHQ have experienced?
Yeah. No, so not specific to the software, it's more specific to the whole notion of digital engagement and an interest in public policy. So when we look at the databases, you got to always put barriers around this, don't you? So when I used to run face-to-face stuff, typically you get an older demographic in the room, and that was one of the reasons I got interested in digital, right? So the average age in the room might be 50. They'd be Anglo. There'd be more men in the room. They'd be cross a lot of the time, that sort of thing. That's kind of the stereotype. Clearly, it's broader than that, but the average age would be closer to 50. The average age that we see in the online space is more like 35. And so you get a spread from like 25 to between 25 and 50 would be the dominant demographics. So in answer to Vivian's question, the barrier is around interest and access, I suppose, sort of awareness, interest and access. So if you're, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're down the bottom somewhere struggling to survive and getting by, then you're not interested in public policy issues. So it's actually just really difficult to get those people involved in conversations. And that's where, when I say that now it's possible to actually see which suburbs people are coming from, and just as importantly, which suburbs people aren't coming from when you're doing your engagement process, that allows you then as an organisation to go, hang on, we're missing out on that entire place. And we know, because we know what the social cohorts look like, that's where our public housing estates are, for example. So then you would go, okay, we actually need a special process to get in there. If we're genuinely going to want to try to include those people in this process, then we actually need to go out physically on the ground and do something a little bit different. So I never ever argue that online is a standalone solution. And I used to prefer a sort of a triangulation method where you'd have 3 different methods and then bring all the data together and hopefully get some coalescence. The beauty of it though is that you definitely pick up from a different audience than you do when you're doing pure face-to-face. So you definitely get different voices involved in the conversation, and you therefore get a much richer, more nuanced picture. And sometimes that can be quite threatening to people that are used to being involved in face-to-face processes, because they're used to being the voices of the community and owning that authority, if you like. That can be quite challenging to them, the fact that there are all these other voices all of a sudden wanting to participate. So that's just something to think about, to throw into the mix.
Sure.
There's another question.
There is, this one is from David, and he just wanted to know how easy it was for council's employees to create a budget allocator for a small project.
It's really simple, really, yeah. It's very quick, and the guys, I mean, it was designed to be self-service, but our guys help anyway. It only gets complicated when you have massive budgets like Halifax, and they have to spend a lot of time internally actually working out how much money they are spending on things. But when Wagga Wagga did they called it the fund bobulator. When they did the fund bobulators about parks expenditure, then it's a really very simple process to get it all set up. So
yep.
Very easy.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like we've covered the majority of questions. If when I read through the questions after the webinar, if there's anything I missed, I'll send them through to you and we'll see if we can get an answer written to those people, if that's okay. Sure. Yeah, look, absolutely. I want to say thank you, because it was very exciting for me to get Bang the Table as part of the 4D Evolution webinar series, because I know it is something that local councils in Australia find so helpful and useful. And I know that as I was going through looking at what different councils were doing in Australia, to start with, Bang the Table was certainly the organisation that was the most represented. So I just wanted to let people know that the next webinar that we're doing covers a different area again, which is sort of online citizens panels and juries. And this is from Jared Bothwell, who actually manages an organisation called Public Voice, and that's what they focus on, is citizens panels and juries. They're based in New Zealand, but they do cover other countries as well, and he will be around on the 15th of April at 12 noon to do that series. So just letting you know, there will be one and then the next in the series. So thank you again, Crispin. It's been really exciting to have you and to have a whole lot of questions answered, and we'll get this information out to people as soon as we can. Okay, thank you. It's been great to be part of. And yeah, if anybody has any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to get in touch. Find me on LinkedIn or anywhere. Yeah, if that's okay, Crispin, in the email, not on the YouTube account, but in the email, I might actually give your email out to the people who signed up to participate, because you're not that easy to find on email on the Bang the Table website. So no, you're very easy. Yep. For a good reason, probably. Okay. I'll make sure these guys get a copy of your email. So if they have any specific questions or they want to chat to you, they can organise that. Yep. Okay. That's no problem. Thanks. All right, it sounds like thanks coming from people as well. So sounds like people appreciated it. Thanks, and we'll talk again soon.